Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today is a very exciting day because I'm going to be showing you how I set up my bullet journal for 2020. So let's get started. The journal I'll be using for this year, or for however long it gets me through, is the Scribbles That Matter journal. And I really wanted to pick up something that had slightly thicker pages than the journal I used last year, which was the Leuchtturm 1917. Don't mind that random hair floating around there. And I picked it up in this really beautiful teal green color. And another thing that I really liked about this journal is that it feels really high quality while still being really affordable. I think I picked mine up for less than 25 bucks on Amazon, and I'll leave a link down below so that you can check that out if you're interested. And just from working with it for a few weeks, I do really love the feel of this journal. It feels very sturdy, and with the thicker pages, I haven't seen any bleeding or ghosting at all on these pages, which I'm really happy about. I think the only downside that I can think of is that since the pages are thicker, you don't get quite as many of them. Last year my journal was about 250 pages, and then this one clocks out at about 160. So I imagine it won't last me quite as long as the last one did, but I'm also going to be doing things a little differently, which I'll explain a little further into the video. There are also a few beginning pages in this journal with a key and an index, which quite honestly I just will not be using at all, so I'm just going to ignore those pages and turn to the first blank spread and start my yearly overlook calendar, which some people would call a future log. And this is another section that I didn't use at all last year, but I would attribute that to me completely messing up all of the calendars for the year so that it wasn't useful for me at all. So this year I'm going to not make that mistake and write in all the calendars correctly. But another thing I'm doing is that instead of filling in 2 whole double page spreads with this future log, I'm just condensing it into one spread so that all 12 months are on there. So there's a little less space for each month, but since I'm not sure how much I'll be using this anyway, I didn't want it to take up too many pages. My layout was really nothing too fancy. I just created some color blocked headers with a Tombow dual brush pen, and then filled in some of the yearly events that I knew would already be there, like holidays and birthdays and travel plans, and just color coordinated those. And this future log is actually the only spread I'm going to set up in the front of my journal, and I'm actually going to turn to the back of my journal because what I decided for this year is that instead of keeping all of my collections in the front, I'm going to keep them all in the back. And this way, if I ever decide to add a few more pages or collections, then I can just add them on in order. And this way they won't end up in between random monthly or weekly spreads where I'll never be able to find them again. So the first spread I'm starting off with, as you can see here, is a measuring guide, and I'm doing this on the pen test page because I just don't see myself having a need for this page, so I'm going to use it instead for this measuring guide, and I'm filling it out by counting out all the squares across and down the page. And last year when I did this page, I didn't split the page into halves or thirds, and I found that I needed that very often when I was doing my weekly spreads, so I made sure to include that this time and did all of the math so that whenever I'm doing a weekly spread, I can just flip to this page and know how many boxes to count out. Now moving backwards, I'm going to be doing a 2020 goals page on the right side of this spread. I suppose you could call them your resolutions if you're into that kind of thing, but I prefer the word goals, so that's what we're going to be going with today. I'm starting off with a fun lettering style for the 2020 so that it's a nice centerpiece for this page. Just thickening up some of the strokes, and then I'm also going to create an outline and then create a drop shadow for that outline. I also left some space underneath this for a banner shape that I'm going to fill in and then write over it with a white gel pen once that's dry. Next I'm going to draw these box-like shapes, not super perfect or square because I refuse to use a ruler, and I think that if you make things a little lopsided then no one can tell if you make a mistake anyways, so I'm going to make it look like they're purposely trapezoids. And I think it turns out looking really fun and whimsical. I'm just going to add some dashed lines connecting these boxes to the header, and then I'm going to fill this in later. So now on the left side of this page, I'm going to start my 26 things page, which is the list I do every year, and just insert whatever age you are for the number. So if you're 22, it would be 22 things while 22. I wanted to create a header that would kind of match the one that I created on the right side of this page, but also look different so that it would be clear that these are two different pages and not one combined spread. So I just followed the general style of font for the header and then also created another banner shape. One of these days I am just going to get too old where I won't be able to fit this on one page, but for now, luckily this all fits on one page. For my next collection, I'm going to need 4 pages, so I'm skipping a spread for now. And then on the left side of that second empty spread, I'm going to create a very large header that just says monthly snapshots. And this is going to be my area for me to fill in with one Instax photo for every month of the year. I'm just starting off with this brush lettered header, which is a really quick and easy way to fill in a large space. And I'm also going to be drawing a really quick illustration above this with a little image of a Polaroid camera. Now I'm going to fill in those other 3 pages with outlines for me to place my Instax photos as the year goes on. So I just pulled out one to use as a little template, and then I'm going to include 4 per page, and just creating a quick little header in brush lettering in the middle of each of these as well. One thing I also want to mention about this notebook is it actually gives you a little tick mark in the center of the page and on the sides where the halfway points are. So this is really useful when you're doing something like this, just to make sure that you are evenly spacing things on the page. And if you're just splitting your page in half, then you never have to do any counting because you just have to find that center tick mark, which I think is super handy. I think this is going to be a really fun page to look back on at the end of the year, where you'll have 1 photo per month. But obviously if you don't have an Instax camera or a Polaroid camera, you can also just do this by printing out your own photos and just size them to fit. Going 1 more page back, I'm going to be filling in my travel log for the year, which honestly I'm just taking straight from last year's journal because I just really like how it came out, and I figured why not just repeat it if it came out so well. So for this page I'm including, again, these little Instax frames, but this time instead of printing out the actual Instaxes as the year goes on, I'm going to be filling them in with illustrations. I'll leave a little photo of what my page from last year looked like so you can see what the end product will be. And I kind of overlapped these frames. So since I had that little one on the right that doesn't really have a lot of empty space showing, I wasn't really going to be able to use it for much during the year. So I just filled it in with a little travel quote artwork piece so that it gives the page a little bit of interest even though it's empty right now. For the left page of this spread, I'm going to be creating a book tracker, and this is another page that I really liked from last year, but I'm stepping up my game a little bit and creating more of a decorative illustration. Last year I just created a very simple bookshelf, but this year I'm going to be creating these floating bookshelves. And I like this idea because I get to kind of stagger the bookshelves on the page, which gives the page a little bit more movement and visual interest. I will say that the one downside of this layout is that since I'm focusing more on the decorative element of this spread, there isn't quite as much space for the actual books. So the books that I have here are quite a bit smaller than the ones I had last year, so I'll just have to make sure that I write the titles really small. I'm also including more decorative elements as well. I'm drawing this little heron statue, which is an illustrated version of an actual statue I have, and the same goes for this little hanging pothos plant that I drew on the top shelf. And the rest of the space is going to be dedicated for actual books because I read a lot, so I'm going to need space for these books. And then I also created this hanging frame in one of the empty spaces, and the other one is going to be where I house this color-coded key because I am going to create a system to rate the books that I read this year. So that's going to go in the top left corner in that frame. So I'm just filling in this painted illustration or photo in this frame, and then I'm going to fill in the rest of this illustration with markers and draw in that rating key as well. Okay, so believe it or not, that's actually all the pages that I'm setting up for the year, at least all the yearly collections. I actually cut out a lot of pages that I did last year because I found that they just weren't useful for me, so I didn't want to waste the time or the pages. And hopefully with this new system, having all the collections in the back, I'll be able to find them more easily in my book and be able to put them to good use without having them getting lost in other spreads. And actually, one other thing I wanted to mention is that in past years I've used my bullet journal as a mix between a planner, a journal, and a sketchbook, and just like all these things mashed into one. So this year I'm going to have this main journal for my planner pages and my collections in the back, and I'm going to have a separate notebook that's just for my journaling. And the notebook I'm going to use is one of the thinner paperback notebooks that I've shown you in multiple videos and in my flip through, just so that I don't have to carry two large journals around with me. And the reason I'm doing this is because when I've just thrown in my journaling pages wherever, it kind of creates this weird flow where my journaling pages are in between weekly spreads, and I don't really like having them broken up like that. So I'd rather just have them all in one journal so that they can all flow together. And hopefully this will also help with not really having as many pages in this journal, so hopefully it will last longer throughout the book, and I can always just switch out that paperback notebook whenever I fill that up. So hopefully that makes sense. Sorry if it's a little confusing, especially with this year, the weird setup of starting things in the back of the notebook, but I hope you guys found this helpful and that it gave you some good ideas for how to set up your 2020 journal. Let me know in the comments down below if there are certain spreads that you love to have in your yearly setup for your bullet journal. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Bye!